Welcome, everybody. I'm Sarah Blessing, and I'm with my good friend Rich Gianzero, and we are doing another episode of From Prison to Pastor. It has been a very scary week in America, and we are going to talk about violence and how we should handle it. How do we make change? How do we push for better and democracy, and at the same time, 100% of the time, call for nonviolence? Rich has had an incredible life. At the age of 16, Rich committed a violent crime and was sent to a maximum security prison in New York for 14 and a half years. While he was in prison, he helped be with people as they were dying, prisoners that committed horrible crimes. He was with them when they died, and he dedicated his life to nonviolence. So if there is an expert I can talk to about what is going on when we are feeling lost and hurt and angry, it is you, my friend. Rich, how are you today? And thank you so much for joining me. I know you are very, very busy.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm okay. Just a little tired, like most people I think are, and trying to navigate being a pastor in this environment and talking to many, many people about the execution of Nicole Good and other acts of violence, and why are people waking up to some realities? Why are people shocked and surprised? Why are some other communities not at all surprised or shocked? So
Yeah, I'm
a
going
lot
to
of
guess you were not shocked. You were saddened and horrified, but not shocked.
no, not at all, not at all, not shocked, not surprised. Well, shocked, yes, in a certain way, but not surprised. So sad.
Yeah. Yeah. I was waiting for some violent act to spark that would start a fire frenzy of division. I'm saddened. I'm so saddened by what happened. I've seen multiple videos and it's horrific. And a lot of my friends are like, oh, this is the time where we get angry and we shout at the rooftops scary things to demand better. And I get it. And I also want ICE to not be around, and I want no one to die, and I want this to stop. But I'm seeing this act of violence spark so much more division in our country. And I know division is not the way out of this. So I just
Mm.
really would love to have some of your wisdom right now, because you have been around violence, more violence than I have ever been around. I can't imagine what your 14 years in prison as a 16-year-old to 30, what that was like for you. You've shared some of it and I've learned a lot
Mm.
from it, but I just really want to hear some of your wisdom, because I know I'm not the only person in America hurting right now.
Yeah, let me say that I'm a victim of sexual violence from childhood, and I committed, as I've shared, here in our show and in many other places. I also committed a violent gun crime, right, against two men when I was 16. So I understand those as acts of violence, right, generally speaking, and they're terrible and horrible. They're criminal and immoral acts. I've also described, my part of my journey as a journey of forgiveness and redemption, someone who needs to forgive and to be forgiven, and that these ideas aren't really just about religious piety or ideas, but they're actually ways of living in the world, right? Ways of forgiveness, seeking forgiveness and forgiving others, right? Both. So there's an interplay on that. At the same time, when we're talking about the kind of violence that you brought up and that so many people across the country are upset about, uh, this is something very different. This is kind of a structural type of violence, right? So we have an individual victim who has been dehumanized, right, by her government and by officials in her government, and labeled as a radical leftist terrorist. Um, and what the purpose of doing that is not so much really about Renee Good, but it's really about the literal word of dehumanizing. It's lowering a person's humanity to a level in which state-sponsored violence is an acceptable outcome from engagement. So I've seen a lot of posts in social media spaces and other spaces too, where folks are talking about, ICE is not allowed to detain citizens without suspicion of being, an undocumented person in the country. They're not a law enforcement agency, right? They're immigration customs enforcement. But what I've pointed out is that the appropriate language is that they are not supposed to do this. They're doing that anyway under orders from the United States government. So I think people need to really think about how they're describing what we're experiencing. This violence is not it's not just a individual act of, like the crime I committed is certainly a violent crime. The sexual assaults, abuses that had happened to me as a child are certainly acts of violence, right? But when we're talking about violence in this way, this violence is it's instrumental, meaning it's a tool. I'll borrow a little bit from some scholars whom I read and read. It's instrumental. It's a tool, right? It's anti-political. We to hone in on that for a minute. And one author and philosopher is described who studied the Nuremberg trials and the trials of Adolf Eichmann and others. It described violence as being the opposite of power. Now, these categories and ideas are, of course, incomplete because we're trying to understand something very disturbing, troubling to us as individuals. But I think we need to make a shift, and I'll say more about this in terms of cultural perspectives. We need to make a shift generally in our thinking about violence and understand violence when it's sanctioned by the state is structural. That's really important for me to look at. We need to look at the stories that we tell, the mythologies and the fairy tales we tell about the establishment of our society. So our society is rooted in violence. It is rooted in conquest, and it is rooted in the seizure of lands and the kidnapping of people, the enslavement of people, and the movement of people onto Indian reservations here in this land, right? It should trouble some of us, I hope all of us, that American Indians or Native American peoples or First Nations peoples, right? There are a number of those peoples and those individuals in ICE custody right now, at this very moment. And they're in ICE custody under suspicion of being so-called illegal.
And they were here before our race of people were here.
Well, there's one race, that's the human race, but we live in the reality.
You're right. It's so stupid that we divide like that. You're so right.
Well, it's not stupid, it's intentional. And
yes,
the categorization by race is itself a categorization rooted in violence that justifies structural violence against subhuman peoples or second and third class citizens. So what I'm saying, we're saying a lot of words here. I'm already saying a lot of words. I'm glad that we're going to cut off at 10 o'clock today, because I don't think that most. And so I'm going to go back to something I said here at a memorial that I was asked to speak at on Saturday regarding Renee Good. And what I said, because of where I live in a community that's 89% white. Okay. As I said, that I asked folks, are you angry? Are you surprised? Are you in shock? And you hear this a lot, right? From well-meaning white folks. And I asked them, I said, I need you to get over that. I need you to embrace your fear, your shock, your terror, and get over it and get engaged in the body politic, get engaged in the community, because this is really nothing new. It's nothing new. And it's sad. But Sarah, you and I were probably raised in similar kind of cultural frameworks in our early years, at least. I was then reared in another space.
Yeah.
But we were told the mythologies of, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, and these lands and these.
Well, I taught this for 18 years.
You taught it.
In fifth grade.
There you go. You taught it.
in a Catholic school, and I did my best to be age appropriate and give them the truth. So my fifth graders did not hear the glorified, sweet version of cuddly Christopher Columbus. It was explained what they were doing, and how that's why we have the separation of church and state now, and how lucky we are that we have that way, and how many people have died in the name of religion. Look at Europe and all the wars they've been on. I really tried to explain accurately to these 10 and 11-year-olds what happened and what continues to happen. So when you speak of this thing, like I did a lot, over half the year, I spoke about Native Americans and taught about tribes, and as accurate as I could. And I'd have people come in and speak, and it, it's fear. It's fear being weaponized. And right now, what you're saying is good advice. We're scared. We need to get over it, and we need to get active. We need to get on the ballot. We need to pay attention to who is on our local ballot, and we need to vote, and we need to vote for change. I mean, that's the solution here. But what
Well,
alarms me is just the people's fears igniting on the internet. And then we have this division, but I honestly just don't think we are as divided as the internet says we are. I really think more of us are horrified by what ICE is doing than what we maybe see online.
maybe maybe I don't have any evidence for that myself. I think the
I mean,
majority.
if we go and talk to people on the street, they're not saying they're happy this woman was murdered. But when you see it on the internet, they're saying it. I don't know if you've realized this, but we've gone viral on YouTube. Project Next has the last few times.
Mhm.
Tim and I did a show on Thursday, and we had 37,000 people watch it live. And we had over 1,000 comments, and most of them were negative. And then my husband was pretty upset because he doesn't like it when people go after me on the internet. So he
Mm.
started researching it. And at first we just thought it was all bots, but it some bots, and then it's like people on the internet's job. They like think it's their role to find liberal media that's live and to troll it. And a lot of it was the same people. And then my husband even like went so far as to research the people, and then he ended up getting empathy for them because they live pretty sad lives, where that's what they thought their mission
Mm.
in life was to troll people speaking live on YouTube. And
Mhm.
um and so I don't think it is real. I think that there are some people who do believe it with their whole heart, and they've been manipulated by this. But I really think when you talk to the majority of your neighbors, the majority of us are horrified by this violence, or they don't know about it.
Mm. Well, it's an interesting take. I also think that it's cultural. I think that if you, so I do talk to people, quote unquote, on the street every day. That's part of what I do. And I think that I'm going to bring this back to violence as an anti political dynamic. I actually think that most people don't care. That's my
Yeah.
opinion. I think that there's a growing number of people who are willing to say we care, this is wrong, and there's a base of people who um, uh, support the government in and of itself based upon an ideology about this nation, who perhaps haven't been victims and perhaps have not been victims yet of the policies and practices, perhaps more so the practices of state-sponsored violence. So violence, in one philosopher's ideology, is described as being anti-political, and what that means is that the body politic is where people come together, right, and have human interaction, debate, conversation, and discourse, right, to iron out, weed out difference, disagreement, to try to pave a path forward, right? But violence, right, replaces political discourse with force and terror. So if people are afraid, and this has made people afraid, well, violence is doing its job. It's doing its job. Okay. So also, in a certain sense, right, we can say that violence is the opposite of power. because power, right, comes from agreement in Hannah Arendt's philosophy, which is, of course, incomplete, and as all ideas are, but sometimes helpful models for us to think about. Power, if power comes in a collective, right, in agreement, right, authority is established when groups of people come together and say we agree that we'll be under this authority, or we'll establish this authority. This is particularly true in religious spaces. This is why we've talked about things like LifeWise Academy and right-wing authoritarian Christianity, which describes about 70% of evangelical Christianity, evangelical white Christianity in this nation.
Do you know how many of those how many evangelicals there are in the country? Do you know of, like, a rough estimate of the
No,
percentage?
no,
'Cause I'm
no,
just
not off the
wondering.
top of
So
my
you're
head.
saying 70% of evangelicals believe in, like, the LifeWise type Christian nationalism? Is that what you're saying?
But either by adherence, right, to these kind of doctrines and ideas, or by being sympathizers. So now I don't want to get off topic here. So
Yeah.
I'm giving
Just
you
see our
examples.
other I've done at least, I think,
Yeah,
3 shows on
yeah,
LifeWise.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
Zach, folks with the Secular Education Association and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, which, by the way, have a faith leaders advisory group, right? They're not anti-Christian.
Right.
There's a space in that's another conversation, but those are resources for people to look at. But violence, as the absence of power, means that um, uh, it's a last ditch effort to control through the threat and the practice of violence. So people are losing their senses of control and power over people because of a lack of agreement or dysfunction, right? An active political engagement, which I'm not saying by political engagement, engaging in the halls of Congress. I'm talking about exercising the ideals that people say generally they agree on, like the right to protest for what is right, to borrow MLK's phrase, right? Just before, by the way, that I think before he was shot and assassinated. Um, when those things deteriorate, right? When human interaction deteriorates, right? Violence is then becomes an instrument uh, to achieve the ends of the ruling class. Okay, and so we are increasingly, if we're honest in this nation, we are increasingly, in fact, making America great again. Let me say that again and explain what I mean. We are increasingly at this time making America great again. We are going back, reverting back to really the intention of the founders, which was to create a landed, limited, limited by wealth and limited by ethnic identity and limited by gender, voting class, or an aristocracy to run the nation. Now, that's not what we're taught. And we have the divisions and the cultural divides in the nation are deep and still with us. So, for example, I was speaking Saturday about some of this, and it was interesting because I had feedback from maybe the one or two non-white persons that were in the crowd who said, gave feedback to me. They said, well, I'm so thankful that you said we have to stop, people need to stop being surprised by these dynamics because we've lived this our entire lives.
Yeah. And, like, I think that, like, for example, I think ICE is going to continue to be violent to people that are white. Maybe it's going to start being white males, and maybe that'll wake up more people. But I think you're talking about a lack of empathy if they just don't care. But they're going to hurt people that look just like them, and so it is going to surprise them. It is going to surprise them, and you're going to be annoyed by them just now catching on. But this is not going away. This problem isn't going away with ICE and what they're doing, and they cannot just continue to lie about it and get away with it.
Well, sure they can.
I don't think they can, because we all
Well,
have phones. We
yeah.
have we have ways to get it to our people. It's going to hit. There are people, my friend Ethan has several people that he's known that have been
Mhm.
harassed by ICE here in Southern Indiana. It's going to affect enough people in our own towns,
Mm,
they cannot do it. So you're kind of thinking the negative thing. I'm kind of thinking this is terrible and I hope nobody gets hurt,
mhm,
but it looks like more people are going to get hurt and it's going to continue to
mhm.
wake up people that have
Well,
not been paying attention.
I'm not thinking negative. I'm thinking big picture
Yeah.
and
Well, I am
contextual.
too. I'm thinking big picture
Mhm.
also. I just think that I think that in today's time, even with all the misinformation, even with the vice president coming out and acting like ICE did no wrong and that being extremely horrifying, even with that, it doesn't matter. We are going to see it. It's going to affect our local communities, and people are going to vote differently. I just, it's just going to get scarier. It's going to be very scary up until November, this election, and hopefully we can make some change. And then it's going to be scary still, but it's gonna
Mhm.
get I have faith that it's going to get better because people want to live in a safe community, and there's only so long we can be traumatized by the division and the manipulation and the scare tactics. There's only so long that we can do it before we wake up,
Well,
and I'm seeing
yeah,
Republicans, for example, wake up
yeah. I
to
don't. I don't want to spend our time like necessarily disagreeing, because we have the same desired outcome, right? To see it's better for all people to actually like take the language that our nation has said to us, liberty and justice for all, for example. Give me freedom or give me death, right? The redcoats are coming. Um, um, big picture for me is, first of all, I can go back to something you said, but let me just say that big picture for me is having a broader understanding of uh, our history in this society, which is increasingly uh, under assault and attack. And I'll say that it's an act of violence by the state to pressure institutions of learning, threaten institutions of learning with funding, because they are teaching facts about the history of our nation. So this is why I say what I say, that there's no inevitability that this will turn out better. There's not an inevitability that it will continue on bad. The inevitability idea is non-existent. What, and this is where you and I will align, what people of good faith do when they're listening and approaching the truth and the facts of our status as a nation right now, that can shift the what's going to happen. There's no inevitability either way. It's what we're going to do as a society with what we have now. So that's why there's an attack on the institutions of learning. That's why J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, did not say ICE did nothing wrong. He didn't lead with that. He said ICE did this summary execution, okay, non-judicial execution in broad daylight because this person was a radical leftist terrorist. So he didn't say they did nothing wrong. He's actually said they did something right.
ugh.
And there's a very big difference between that. He said that the agents of the government, of which he's the number two person, right, in the United States government, actually did something right. They executed this person and they needed to categorize this individual in this way to dehumanize people. And what I'm saying is that we don't have a way forward in society unless we have a fundamental moral embrace of other people as our neighbors, as human beings. So this is how have been approaching this from myself. When people ask me to say things or whatever in these kind of spaces, I usually now begin to say, I'm speaking to you. You know, I'm a pastor. Yay, good for me. Most of the time, I know how to dress well. My wife still thinks I'm handsome. Wonderful for me. But I'm a second class citizen. I cannot vote. And one of the fundamental things that we are taught as children in this nation, white children in particular, is that um, no taxation without representation. And because of what the British Parliament did to their own people in the colonies, taxing people without representation, so that we had a violent insurrection called the American Revolution. And so I'm a second class citizen. I cannot vote. What I can do is use my First Amendment right, as such as it is now, we're on this show, and I happen to be a faith leader to point out to people that the narratives that we're living in, the stories and mythologies of our nation and society, are intentionally limited and narrow to create perspectives about other people to make them less than human, to redefine humans. This is why you heard you hear the Christian language of the missionary conquest age as bringing civilization to the savages, right? The erasure of human history. And the goal of doing that is to redefine what it means to be a human being. You're not fully human. And so Renee Good is an example as an individual victim of state violence, an individual that people can see and white Americans can look at and either respond to the rhetoric of the violent rhetoric of government, which says this is a leftist, radical, left-wing terrorist, which is the official statement of the Vice President of the United States of America. Or you can look at this person and say, here's a person exercising their First Amendment right to be engaged with their government in protest with a whistle, and she was shot 3 times at point blank range. And this will offend somebody because I'm a pastor, but her last words, now that we have the release of the body cam footage, was, "I'm not mad at you, dude." And the ICE agent, you remember the last words that we have for the ICE agent. So I'll say them. I want to say them on here because I hope that if people won't, maybe people will get mad at me, but maybe people will start paying attention. "Fuck you" is what he said. So you shoot somebody in the face and then you F off. And then we have AI generated images that have placed the wheels of the car in different positions and stuff. So
yeah,
thank
that's
God.
so sad.
Well, it's not sad. It's intentional.
Yeah, it's intentional.
And so I'm not negative.
I mean, we saw that we knew this was coming, that AI is getting so good that it's going to be hard to tell whether it's real or not. We saw that it was coming, and of course it's going to be weaponized. It's intentional. You're right. I think you have to go soon, but if we can just all collectively agree that humans are humans and every life has value, and this was completely unavoidable, and more is going to come if we don't all collectively stand against what is happening.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage my friends that are very far to the left, that are very angry and are protesting, to be as nonviolent and loving as possible for everyone's protection. If we could calm down the temperature, and it's very hard right now. And like somebody right now is pointing out, well, your side celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. I didn't. I caught from day one. I said that was wrong and horrible. And so we can't all group people into 2 groups. I'm calling for nonviolence with everybody, regardless of how they vote. And I need the other side to do that too. I need Republicans. I need leaders. I need people calling for unity to stand against all violence.
Yeah.
And nobody should be, if I'm running for office, and that's scary. You're a pastor giving speeches at ICE events, like, against ICE. It's scary. We do not want violence. We want to be able to advocate for peace and be safe. So everybody that, we need more of that, because this is a scary time.
Yeah. Let me say something else about violence and effects of violence. So, there's a person that I have a lot of respect for that sent me a comment about, and I'm trying to be vague on purpose because I don't want to out this individual. And talked about the ICE agent who did the shooting. Now that individual is going to live for the rest of his life with the realities of that and that video. And so when the agents of the state, and the state is sponsoring this kind of interaction, it also dehumanizes the people who are agents of the state. It harms them too. So this isn't just an interaction between 2 individuals, right? This is something in a larger context of our society. And that doesn't mean that there should absolutely be a full criminal investigation on this person, right? At the same time, the acts of violence committed on behalf of the state, right, dehumanize the actors as well. They lose their humanity along the way. There is something that has to change in the thinking of people. Uh, and this is probably a good note to end on, right? There's something that has to change inside of people in order for them to perpetuate violence, to lock people up, to put children in zip ties. There's a certain kind of inhumanity from those actors that has to develop in their character or been developed over time. And that is a sickness and a disease and a dehumanization of their own persons as well. So there's we so in the aspect in the concept of nonviolence without a hyphen, okay, not NONVIOLENCE, not hyphen in there. We are called actually to be incredibly assertive and aggressive toward and against forces of evil and abuse, while recognizing that people who commit abuse, they themselves are also victims of this system. We see this economically when we say poor white people voting for uh, politicians whose policies
Hurt them.
harm and strip uh, their own needs. You and Tim have covered this, right, regarding rural hospitals in Indiana.
Right. We're
And
voting for the people that are taking away our
so
hospitals.
instead
Yes.
of, so what I'm trying to get to with an extended viewpoint around these things is that there's connecting points on all these issues that people are facing. And it is the dehumanization of people and ideologies that split and divide people intentionally. So the folks who are embracing of, you know, certain narratives about the state and the law are going to obey and continue to adopt um, positions to support state-sponsored violence. It's rationalized. State-sponsored violence always rationalizes away the human empathy. We've seen an attack on empathy. These things are all tools of violence to in a last-ditch effort to retain power, and that's why violence is described by some as being anti-political, right? Because so
We need to buy into our political system. We need to buy into the community and
well,
collectively put effort into it to keep us safe.
well, I'm not going so far as to say buy into our political system, but I'm a second-class citizen. So should I buy into a political system that says to me
I
you
think
cannot vote?
I think
How
you
about that?
nonviolently do it and say you would like to vote. Yeah, and I'm with you because there's a lot of problems with our political system. So we engage in it and we follow the laws that are given to us and then we push
What? Yeah.
for better.
What I
But
buy,
it's
what I
yeah,
buy into, what I buy into is truth telling, because truth telling is a path to peacemaking.
that is
And
why that's one of many reasons why I like you. I am also very big into let's just tell the truth. I don't care what political side
yeah,
I'm on. Let's tell the truth. Yeah.
yeah. So let's go there. Let's be honest about. So just for the record here, I am not a registered member of any political party. Okay, and there's reasons for that, which we don't need to get into right now. Um, but if the minority party in the United States government right now is not obstructing and using procedural and process privileges because of their position to stop this, then they're as complicit as those who are pushing the ideological agenda. We are that's just a reality. Um, anything, but all this is predicated on a public that wants to be informed, that will ask questions, will think critically. And finally, I'll say this: we should wrap up. That what part of what we're seeing happening is the fruits of this long narrative of our nation, which has been restrictive. When you use the pronoun we and us, I always wonder who are those. When anybody uses this, who is the we that we're talking about? Because we
Mhm.
are not surprised. We are not, shocked that this happened. The we being those of us who,
Or
have lived different kind of lives or come from multicultural spaces. We are not surprised at all. We are continually disappointed with the majority of Americans who refuse to look for truth in the narrative of our nation's history. And the reason why is because the ideology right? This myth narrative, right, of this land and this socio-political establishment of our country, which I'm glad to be American, don't get me wrong, which is why I'm glad to criticize us, which is what James Baldwin's point was.
We're lucky that we're allowed to.
For now, we are allowed to in diminishing degrees. So
Yeah.
what I want to get to with that is that the ideology, right, has become the identity of many, many people. And so to ask for truth or to say something that counters the ideology or the framework of belief is actually a threat to people's senses of identity. They have not, another way to say that is that we have structured a society where people are not encouraged to develop personality and their own sense of self, which is what Mr. Rogers talked about, people becoming what they can and discovering that along the way. So this is why state-sponsored violence and restriction always uses religion as a tool of control, because it has an ideological framework for which people can establish their own identity and sense of self. So that's why these kind of religious systems, in our country, it's Christianity doing this. In other parts of the world, it's Islam or other religious expressions, right? And I'll pause to say not all Muslims and not all Christians, but certainly those in power, they have to express religion. And Christians in this country, conservative Christians in particular, fundamentalists, have to create a black and white space, an either or dynamic, which is really all about signaling that you're part of this identity group, instead of the Christian concept of discipleship, which is a journey in following Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, rooted in loving your neighbors yourself. So we're caught up in a situation here because our identities in society are framed around an ideology that doesn't really serve people. It doesn't serve the development of human personality. It doesn't serve people becoming individuals as they can, as part of a community of people who are different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to go to the root problems, hoping that people will critically think and reflect, look at their own lives. And I'm willing, as you've always pointed out and been so gracious, my friend, I'm willing to share about the worst parts of my life, because facing myself in the mirror of possibility of becoming a person again and not just a criminal kid, it forced me to really take long looks at myself. And I continue to do that, self-reflection and honesty. And I want to encourage other people to be honest about themselves, honest about
honestly ask
the
yourself, are you
stories.
really thinking that this murder was justified? Just take a minute. Just take a minute and just think about it. And think, like, I mess up all the time. I shouldn't be murdered because I make a mistake. Like, come on, everybody, wake up. Wake
Yeah.
up. This is a human being. No human should die violently. Like,
And
that's,
my point of call to conscience is that there's two things. We have the individual, Renee Good. She is one of about 36 people who either died in ICE custody or as a result of ICE
so
actions,
sad.
right?
Yeah.
Just in the last 12 months. But this is systemic. This is structural. This is state-sponsored dynamics.
And we all need to collectively say this is wrong. Like,
well, I argue that the Constitution of the United States says it's wrong in the Fourth Amendment. Many people are making that argument. Unlawful search and seizure, right? Detaining United States citizens. The ability to racially profile brown-skinned people who may speak a different language because you suspect them. I mean, so I would argue that, if we need a little bit more commitment to neighborly love, but understand this is structural.
Yes.
Renee Good is a symbol. Charlie Kirk is a symbol. Charlie Kirk should never have been murdered as an act of individual violence in the context of the seeds that have been sown in our society of violence for hundreds of years. So truth-telling, honesty, can allow us to get to roots of these issues and see one another as human beings. Even if somebody completely disagrees with me, I'm not willing to say they're not my neighbor. I'm willing to say, again, honestly, oh, we disagree, we differ. I'm okay with the difference. That's fine. I'm okay with disagreement. I'm not okay with abuse and acts of violence and dehumanizing anybody else. So may we see one. And here, perhaps I'll say these last words. You can tell me what you think. Uh, may we learn to look at each other and our neighbors as human beings and neighbors, not suspects, not with suspicion, but with a sense of wonder about what we can be and become as individuals connected to each other in humanity. Period.
Just a simple act of being kind to a stranger instead of being fearful is so powerful and so needed right now. You know, seeing someone that speaks a different language and not immediately being fearful of them, but smiling at them. We have apps on our phone now where we can translate and talk to each other. Just the simple act of not choosing fear in that second is extremely powerful and needed right now in this country. Most of us that are paying attention are scared, regardless of what side we are on. I'm just asking that
That's a good point.
we just choose the smile instead of the I'm scared they're going to hurt me.
Well, how about this? How about this for Christians out there? Jesus said, if you only greet those who agree with you, what more have you done than sinners? Somebody asks you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. How about turn the other cheek? You know, somebody's going to come out on the show here and say, either one of us or both of us are radical leftist terrorists, or I'm not a real pastor, or people within my own.
And those people are scared.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and it's a way for them to feel control by going after us because they are also scared. Yeah. The country that is paying attention is scared. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's absolutely true. And who's creating the fear? How's it being created? It's hard to scare. It's hard to look at people with inhumanity whom you actually look at in their face or say hello to, or think about their family or their children. That's why I point out that even the agents of state-sponsored violence, or those who commit violent acts, they themselves are having their humanity stripped away. I'm not asking us to feel pity for anybody. I'm asking us to understand that when the puppet masters, the plantation masters of 2026, okay, are controlling narratives and telling us how to think about our neighbors, we, no matter what left or right wing, right, your humanity is actually being stripped away. And they discovered this at the end of every authoritarian regime. We got to end, but
yeah, you gave me some good ways to view this, and I really appreciate it because I need wisdom right now. And I just appreciate I'm going to think about it more. You're right. We're dehumanizing both sides, even the people committing the violent acts. We're not looking at their situation.
Yeah, I'm not asking us to do that. I don't want you to put words in my mouth. I love you as a friend, but I'm not. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the structure, the organization,
right, is dehumanizing everybody. Right.
We should, as individuals, I'm not interested in dehumanizing any other individual. But what I'm saying is this structure that we're under right now, right, is itself dehumanizing, because violence, when we talk about it as an instrument, right, it's an authorized tool and instrument. Another way to say this is the classic excuse, I was following orders. And so we saw that in fascist societies and communist authoritarian regimes, we saw people say, we were just following orders. And many writers have pointed out to folks who shared their stories of being abused by communist authoritarian regimes and Nazi or fascist regimes, right, would say it wasn't like Stalin or Hitler or Mussolini who actually came and harmed me, right? But it was the baker. It was the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. It was my neighbors who were brought into this narrative. And so everyone loses their humanity under a system that accepts structural violence as an instrument towards retaining power. And you are disempowered if you're on the right wing. You're continually disempowered from becoming an empathic human being and neighbor when you're doing these things. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking individually. I'm talking ideologically and systemically. This is what's happening, and that's the division: us versus them. And the anyway, that I have other engagements I need to
Yeah,
be
you go
to,
ahead and go off.
and
I'm going to say
I
a couple things about what's going
sure.
on this week with
All right.
Project Next, and I wish you all the best and so much love to you and your family.
Peace and love. Happy New Year, and
You too, and be safe.
thank you so much. You too. Bye now.
Bye. Okay, so thanks for everybody that's listening. I hope that Rich gave some wise words that can help all of us because this is hard. Please, please try to stop dehumanizing people. All life is precious. We don't have to be perfect. Rich is far from perfect. When he was very young, he committed a horrible crime and paid the price for it, served, was in prison for 14 and a half years. And now he cannot vote in the state of Kentucky where he lives because of that. And I'm just really fearful for my friends on the super far to the left that are very upset, that are protesting, that have angry signs. We need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and we need to call this out as wrong, call out the structural government systems that are put in place as wrong, and we need to work with our neighbors who might have voted for this and didn't realize it was going to happen. They didn't know this was going to, I didn't foresee this happening. I didn't vote for Trump, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad. We need to work together with our neighbors, with our community to collectively say what is happening right now is wrong and we need to vote for better. I'm going to do a show tomorrow with my co-founder and good friend Tim Peck. We're going to do another morning show and it's going to be a lot lighter and we're going to laugh some, but we're also going to talk about this stuff, which is deep and hard. That should be around 9:15, 9:30 tomorrow morning. I want to invite anybody in Harrison County to the leadership to the meeting that I'm going to have tomorrow at 6 o'clock Tuesday, the 13th. I'm going to do a meeting on if anybody wants to run for something. In my county, it's 100% Republican, which means all of us have lost our voice in the county, whether you're Republican or not. They don't listen to us, our elected officials. They just do what the bullies tell them to do. And so we need help. We need help running for things. So if you want to come, that's at 6 at the Harrison County Community Foundation. You don't have to have voted Democrat. You just have to want to care about the community and put everybody first to come. There's like over 40 spots on the ballot that we need to fill up. And our supermajority of Republicans in Indiana made it even harder to run for something in Indiana. They bumped the date up to file a few months. So we have less time to get people on the ballot. So I really need help. So if you can come, bring some people that might want to run, or just contact me if anybody is interested. I love all of you. So much love to everybody. Love to the people that are on here that think that they can troll and say mean things and that gives them some sense of control. Love to you, my friend. I know that this is scary. We just need to call for peace and unity, and let's smile at our neighbor instead of fear them, and don't believe the online division. Don't believe this propaganda on both sides telling us that the other sides are enemies. Most of us are good. Love you guys and hope to see you tomorrow with the morning show. Bye, everybody.